George Washington was from California. No, seriously, he was from some Virginians, No, he was from California. In fact, he chopped down his cherry tree in California. In fact, it wasn't a cherry tree, it was a redwood. And his father confronted young George and said, "George, did you chop down that tree?" And George said, "Father, I did. I cannot tell a lie." And his father said, "Well then, George, if you cannot tell a lie, you better pack your bags and move to Virginia because you don't have a future in California politics." Lots of people have written about how poor countries fall apart. And you can get lots of articles about Syria and South Sudan and so on. Very few people have grappled with the following. Rich countries fall apart throughout history. We recently celebrated my wife's grandmother's 101st birthday, a couple weeks ago. When she was born, there was an Ottoman Empire, and there was a Habsburg Empire. And they controlled North Africa, the Middle East, and Middle Europe. And they're gone. They're gone. There's no guarantee that this country will withstand the gale forces coming from abroad and from within. Again, just reminiscing about when I was growing up on the Jersey Shore, which is where our friend Mark had grown up. I remember my dad flipping hamburgers when I was a little kid, and because it was the Jersey Shore, we were swatting mosquitoes as he flipped the burgers. And one neighbor says to my dad, "Well, if Nixon gets elected, I'm moving to Canada." And then a few years later, "Well, if Carter gets elected, I'm moving to Canada." Reagan, "Well, if Reagan gets elected, I'm moving." So I'm thinking as a kid, Canada must be a really crowded place by now. But it's not. Why? Because my dad's friends were bluffing, right? I mean, it was the Rheingold beer and the Mai Tais and the summer nights. And, sure, they were just bluffing about this. But now, for the first time in my life, I worry that the people who say they're going to move to New Zealand or buy property in Australia, they may not be kidding. In fact, for the last 5 years, increasing record number of Americans have renounced their citizenship. Now, some of them do that for tax reasons, but never before. There were tax reasons in prior eras, but it never took place before. Anything can happen. Anything can happen now in this political world of ours. The Brits leaving Brexit? This is a scary story. From the mainstream media. I can't believe the New York Times, this lower slide here. Her Majesty's jihadists. More British Muslims have left Britain to join ISIS than have signed up to serve in Her Majesty's military forces. It is truly a critical time in American history and in Western civilization. Eleanor had mentioned, I quote, Casablanca. There's a great scene at the beginning, towards the beginning of Casablanca. You might remember. You've got Colonel or Captain, I don't remember, Colonel Heinrich Strasser, the Nazis at the table. And he turns to Rick Blaine, Humphrey Bogart, and says, "What is your nationality?" And Humphrey Bogart says, "Me, I'm a drunkard." And then the French captain says, "Well, that makes Rick a citizen of the world." Well, you kind of wonder today to how deeply patriotism is felt in people's bones, or do many people feel now like they're citizens of the world? I call it the airplane test. Let's say an airplane is skidding down the runway. And before it begins to skid, you turn to passengers near you and say, "Hey, tell me about yourself." And what are they likely to say? One of them might say, "Well, I'm a fantasy football fanatic," right? Another person might say something like, "Well, I'm getting the new iPhone as soon as it comes out," right? And another person might say, "Well, me, I'm gluten-free, and and I don't like the pretzels on this airline because they're gluten," right? And if the plane started skidding and there was a choice, what is one thing you're going to take with you? How many people would grab their iPhone or your fantasy football picks or your gluten-free muffins or an American flag? And I kind of worry that the American flag, and think about Iwo Jima, all right? The American flag might not be anywhere near the top of the list of what people might say. Where have all the Habsburgs gone?